You ever get stuck in your head trying to figure out the best course of action for every single decision? Like, say you're at a restaurant and you're looking at the menu and you're trying to choose between the steak and the salmon, and you start overthinking, well, what if the steak is overcooked? Or maybe the salmon has too many calories. Maybe I should go with something healthier, but will a salad be filling enough? And before you know it, the waiters come back 3 or 4 times and you're still stuck in your head, weighing the pros and cons, almost like it's a life or death situation. Or maybe it's something like this: you're at a party and you're replaying a conversation that you just had. Did I come off as too aggressive when I disagreed? Maybe I shouldn't have laughed at that joke. Are they thinking that I'm awkward? Or maybe you get caught up in this sort of internal debate defending your actions. I should have told them why I was late. It wasn't my fault. And if they bring it up again, I'm going to be sure to explain everything. And you start overthinking and analyzing the confrontation that may or may never happen. Or how about this one? You decide it's time to get fit, so you hop online and you look for a simple workout routine. Then 3 hours later, you're buried in browser tabs about keto versus paleo, the benefits of intermittent fasting, the pros and cons of getting a Peloton or joining your local gym. And you haven't moved an inch, but you've managed to give yourself a big headache from all the conflicting advice. I had been there, my friend. In fact, recently I was trying to get organized, so I spent this absurd amount of time developing the perfect spreadsheet to organize my life. I mean, there were color-coded tabs, automatic formulas, the works. But instead of actually using it, I got lost into this fantasy of how I could turn it into an app and sell this amazing spreadsheet and make a fortune. In the meantime, my to-do list just kept growing and growing. Sound familiar? Well, congratulations, you might be an overthinker, just like me. But don't worry, you're in good company, because overthinking is pretty common. In fact, a study published in the Journal of Personality and Individual Differences found that up to 73% of adults aged from 25 to 35 reported overthinking at least once a week. So if you're an overthinker, you're definitely not alone. On the other hand, overthinking can seriously mess with your life. I mean, it'll ramp up your stress and your anxiety because you're playing the scenario over and over, and you just get stuck in this worry mode. It can kill your decision-making skills, and you can get so caught up in thinking through every little possibility and outcome that in the end, you end up doing nothing at all. This mental analysis paralysis can literally tank your productivity and keep you from moving forward in life. Plus, overthinking can strain your relationships. And if you're second guessing what you've done wrong or what you've said wrong or how others see you, it creates an unnecessary tension and a lot of misunderstanding. And then over time, you can feel isolated and less satisfied with your relationships. And in the long run, consistently being in your head can lead to bigger issues like depression, generalized anxiety disorder. So tackling overthinking is really critical for your mental health and your overall well-being. If this sounds like you, stick around, because I'm going to share some things, some tools that can help you break free from overthinking. These are things that I've done that I found helpful. But before we dive in, do me a favor. Click the like button, ring the bell, and if you're not already a subscriber, smash that too. Seriously, don't overthink it. Just click the button. Boom, there you go. Good job. Now, in the past, I've done a little bit of computer code writing. Not a lot, but enough to get the basic ideas, the problems that computer programmers face. Our brains are constantly processing information, and they're designed to resolve whatever stimulus they're fed. And just like a computer, our brains run on algorithms, patterns of thought that help us make sense of the world. But sometimes these algorithms can get stuck in what computer programmers call the infinite loop, or what I like to call the feedback loop from hell. So in computer programming, an infinite loop is when a sequence of instructions repeats endlessly due to the loop's termination condition never being met. This usually happens because of a logic error, where the exit criteria are either incorrect or not properly updated within the loop. Our brains can often get stuck in overthinking feedback loops for similar reasons. And the way you solve a problem in the brain is to change the code, just like you do in a computer. One thing a computer programmer might use to debug their code is something called clear goal and termination conditions. When writing a loop, the programmer has to ensure that they have a reachable termination condition that prevents the infinite loop. Overthinking is similar. We've got to set clear goals or decision criteria for your thoughts. Define what success looks like for you, or establish a good enough point. For example, you're going to decide to stop thinking about a problem once you've identified 3 viable solutions. Another thing programmers do is regular checkups and updates. In programming, Loop variables are regularly updated to move towards termination. When we overthink, we need to regularly check in with ourselves to see if our thoughts are productive. You want to update your approach or perspective if you're stuck in a repetitive thought pattern. In other words, you want to ask yourself questions. For example, one of my favorite go tos when I find myself overthinking is I'll ask myself the question: is this thought serving me? Is it helping me solve the problem? Or is it just causing me more stress? And if it's not serving me, then what I'll do is I'll find a thought that does serve me. Computer programmers also have to be aware of off by one errors. In programming, you have to pay attention to boundary conditions to avoid small mistakes that prevent loops from terminating. When you're overthinking, small cognitive distortions or biases can keep you stuck. For instance, all or nothing thinking, or recognizing when you're falling into the trap of overgeneralization. These types of thoughts can keep you stuck in overthinking. So, for example, you're overthinking your performance at work. All or nothing statement is like, I always mess up. I'll never get promoted. So, you want to interrupt those thoughts with specific instances where you have performed well, where you could improve. This helps you prevent overgeneralization and keeps your thoughts productive. Computer programmers also have to write break conditions in the code, using a statement, a break statement that exits the loop when a specific condition is met. So when it comes to overthinking, you also want to use break conditions. For example, you decide you're going to stop thinking about a problem after a set period of time, or once you've considered a certain amount of options. You might give yourself, I'm going to think about this problem for 15 minutes and then I'm going to move on. Or I'm going to come up with 3 solutions and then I'm going to move on. I've had this happen to me where I've been overthinking an upcoming presentation. I set a mental condition. I say, after I've rehearsed this 3 times and reviewed my notes, I'm going to give myself permission to stop worrying about it. This way, I start to prevent the endless rehearsals and the anxiety, and it frees up my mental space for other tasks. It's basically coming to a conclusion of good enough. Another term in computer programming is maximum alliterations. Programmers have to set a maximum number of alliterations to ensure that a loop eventually terminates. In overthinking, we also want to set a limit for how long you're going to think about a problem before you take action. For example, you might give yourself 30 minutes and then make a decision. And you make the decision based on the information at hand, not what is the best solution, but the best solution given the data that you have in the moment. I've used this before. For example, I had a financial decision to make and I set a timer for 30 minutes and I used the time to weigh the pros and the cons. I sort of made a list of, pros and cons. I made it time bound, which prevented me from getting stuck in the analysis paralysis. But then I made a decision. So when it comes to overthinking, the first thing you want to do is define the problem clearly. Let's say you're anxious about an upcoming job interview. Instead of letting your mind spiral, pinpoint the aspects of the things that you're particularly worried about. What am I concerned about? What am I most afraid of? And perhaps it's a potential question or your answers, how you might react in the interview. Set a time for how long you're going to allow yourself to think about it. Say 30 minutes. I'm going to focus on planning and responding to the strategy. Use a timer to make sure you stick to the limit. Once the time's up, you make a conscious decision to move on. You want to establish criteria for making the decision during the time. For the job interview, for example, you might decide that you're going to prepare your answers to the top 10 most common interview questions. You do some research on the company's recent projects, you plan your outfit, you have your checklist, you focus on your thoughts, and as you gather more information and more insights and you update your thoughts regularly, you learn maybe a new detail about the company's culture or the interview process, so you just adjust accordingly. Make notes so you can keep track of this new information and how it might impact your strategy. And you want to periodically check in that you've reached a point that you can make a decision or take action. Because in the end, what overthinking is a lack of making a decision. And one of the things that leaders do is they have to make decisions. They have to make decisions based on the data that they have at the time. But ultimately, you have to give yourself permission to stop worrying, trust your preparation, and just make the decision. It's similar to like when you're trying to decide what you want on the menu. You finally just make a decision. You say, I'm going to have the salmon. It's that easy. But it's our fear that keeps us stuck in making a decision. And when you realize that decision making is part of leadership and that good leaders really only make good decisions maybe 30 or 40% of the time, it can help you relax and understand that you're probably going to make some wrong decisions in life. So don't shame yourself. You simply just say, I made a decision, I'm living with that, and I'm moving on to the next one. And then another aspect I think is really important is to not only recognize that you're overthinking and make a decision, but relax in the fact that you're doing the best you can at any particular moment. And that's all anybody can ask from you. So rather than overthinking, just make a decision. I know, maybe a little easier said than done, but I found that if I just decide, if I just make a decision, then that sort of resolves that infinite feedback loop. So what do you think? Are you an overthinker? Are you overthinking whether or not you're an overthinker? Comment below and let me know. Or do you have any other hacks for overthinking? Or maybe you're a computer programmer. Did I get it right? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this episode, check out this one up here. The best way to get unstuck in life is to know what's holding you down. All right, love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on The Recovery Nice Guy.